It's now time for Monster Soup, with your really fun at parties host, Dave Spencer, and his level-headed co-host, Brian McKinney. These dudes will explore all the crazy mysteries roaming off forest and deserted hallways. After all, monsters are real. It's Monster Soup time right now. Get it while it's hot. Now your hosts, Dave and Brian.
Hello. My name is David Spencer, your Golden Retriever host. This is Monster Soup, kitchen and conversation of cryptids, misfits, and these kids. Today, I am Dave Spencer, as I said, and with me, as always, is the leader of the Lost Boys, Bangarang, as they call him, but Brian McKinney, as I call him. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am fantastic. All right. Well, this week, I want to get right into it because we have a very cool guest with lots of fun stories. His name is Dr. Stephen F. Stringham. So I'd like to welcome him to the stage. How you doing, buddy?
Just fine.
All right. So you have a book coming out, or that is the Phantom Grizzly, Moments of Terror, Years of Fascination, and Lifetime Adventures. Details your many years of encounters and observations of these awesome creatures, the bear, obviously. Let me see where my is that. Welcome to the show.
First of all, welcome to the show. Before we get too deep into the book itself, tell us a little bit about your background and your credentials and kind of how you got into studying the bear population and wildlife in general.
Well, the story I tell in the book called Phantom Grizzly, about the Phantom Grizzly, I'll just say that during my encounter with him, I was so terrified that I did a lot of praying, and I swore that if I wasn't harmed by the bear, I'd devote the rest of my life to conserving bears. And well, that's what turned out to come along.
Huh. That's nuts. So it says on the back of your book that you have over 20,000 close encounters. I assume that's both grizzly and black bears. Is that both of them?
Yeah, mostly grizzlies, especially in the Alaska seacoast where they're known as brown bears.
Mm-hmm. So, how do you survive a bear attack exactly?
Well, I've never been attacked, but I've certainly had a lot of encounters with which I have to survive. I mean, when I first started studying bears, I didn't know whether I was going to survive. It was a lot of terrifying times, especially at night when you hear them outside your tent, huffing and puffing and growling because they're pissed off. And I assumed it's because they were very angry. It took me a long time before I realized mainly they were very frightened because they didn't know what was going on. And to them, people were very aggressive and dangerous. So anyway, survival became a matter of my learning how to cope with bears, but mainly bears learning that I was not a threat to them, so that they became more tolerant of me. And the whole secret to things is winning their trust, but maintaining their respect. You need both.
And where do you do most of your studies with the bears?
I've done studies in many areas of North America, especially many areas of Alaska. Brown bears has been my primary subject, but with black bears, I spent a number of years studying them in Vermont and upstate New York, somewhat in California and Montana, but a lot of it in Southeast Alaska, down in the various islands there. Some islands have brown bears, some islands have black bears. No islands have both bears because they don't work out too well together. But most of my study of brown bears, that also known as grizzly bears, has been on the southwestern coast of Alaska, up on the Alaska Peninsula area, or on the Kenai Peninsula where I live now.
Oh, wow. And you teach as well, right?
Yeah, I have taught at a number of colleges and universities, including University of Alaska. And currently I'm not teaching, but I've got a course planned for next fall on bears and bear safety.
Oh,
So, and I also train people in bear safety and on bear biology. Last Friday, for instance, a week ago, I gave a talk to the general public over at our local college about living in harmony with bears, which to many people sounds a little crazy, but it actually is quite feasible up here. I mean, we have, several hundred brown bears and even more black bears here in the Kenai Peninsula, a lot more than in the Yellowstone National Park area. And people freak out down there about it, and here we just sort of take it for granted.
Huh. Yeah, that's like when you see people who live in like Florida and they just see alligators and they're just kind of like, yeah, that's just there, and they're swimming in the water, and you're like, get out of the water. Yeah. So when you said that you gain their trust, how do you gain a bear's trust, like as just a person being kind of in their space?
Well, the typical situation when you encounter a bear is that the bear is afraid because you're something strange and it doesn't know what you are. So it's kind of like some of the people who talk on your shows about encountering an alien or something of the sort, and the first thing they do is get the hell out of there. And that's what the bears often do, is just leave. But if you were at a concentrated food source like a salmon stream or a dead whale or a berry patch, something like that, garbage dump, the bears want the food, so they will tolerate having you there. Sometimes they'll try to drive you off. Sometimes they just want to eat. They don't want to spend a lot of time hassling with you, so they just go ahead and eat. And over time, they learn, the person isn't hurting me. So they more or less relax, and it goes from there. And then eventually you'll have a situation where maybe you encounter a bear near there in the woods and it sees you. Instead of saying, oh my God, it's a human, attack before a person can hurt me, they say, oh, thank God it's not another bear.
Yeah. Yes. They're
a lot more afraid of each other than they are of us if we're not hunting them.
Yeah. So most people fear that they won't like survive even one attack. How does anyone like survive hundreds or even thousands of attacks like you have?
Or even just like encounters.
Encounters.
Right. Yeah. There's a little difference.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I've been attacked 1,000 times.
I have that like Ohio brain when I say like I saw a bear, I've just been attacked by it. So, right? Because I've never seen one, and I'm just assuming. So I apologize.
Our experience with bears is pretty much going to the zoo.
Right. Near here is a river called the Russian River. And there was a fellow who went up there with his camcorder, and a bear came out of the woods onto the trail he was walking on. And he plays the bear coming out back and forth a dozen times, making all sorts of strange sounds and making it sound like the bear was attacking him. And he had, 500,000 hits last time I looked, and nothing whatsoever happened. And why? Well, it's kind of like driving a car. Now, everybody's probably had close calls in a car. Some have accidents in a car. Yet we go on driving. And we know that if you have good tires in your car, good brakes, good windshield wipers, et cetera, you're reasonably safe. Maybe you don't go out on the New Year's Eve when a lot of people are drunk. You take precautions, and then you go along with your life. It's the same way with living with bears. You learn certain situations are dangerous, others less so. You learn certain things you can do to minimize your risk, and you behave accordingly, and very few people are injured. I mean, nationwide, in fact, continent-wide in North America, only one person is killed every couple of years and a few people injured by bears. And we've got like 1 million black bears and 60,000 brown bears. So there are literally probably millions of encounters every year with very few people being injured. And where I live, I've never been injured by a bear, and the only people who've been seriously injured by bears on a bear viewing trip up here were Tim Treadwell and his girlfriend 20 some years ago.
Mhm.
But other than that, more people have been injured in car accidents and plane crashes going to viewing sites than have ever been injured by the bears.
Mhm.
You know, you're giving me the confidence to like walk up to one and hug them, which you should not do. Like,
No.
I'm gonna be.
No.
It's gonna be dangerous for me out there.
Yeah, I was surprised a couple years ago. My family went down to like the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge area in Tennessee, down in the Smoky Mountains, and it's full of I guess it's black bear that's down there, and we were surprised at like the cabin we stayed at. They're just like, hey, the bears, they're around, they're gonna come. And it was kind of like a little condo area of like, cabins and stuff like that, touristy type stuff. But they're like, they'll come, they'll try to get in your car. They can open the doors, be sure your doors are locked, lock up the garbage. But they're like, just leave them alone. They'll be fine. They're not going to hurt you or anything like that. And I was so just kind of surprised at how passive they were about it. It was just almost like it was just like a loose cat in the neighborhood kind of a thing. It was like, just leave it alone. They'll leave you alone. Don't worry about it. I was surprised to hear that because I just assumed that they were going to be more aggressive. But I'm glad to hear they're not.
Yeah, I got my doctorate studying those bears a little bit down there. Most of my study was on grizzly bears, but I helped the guys studying black bears and know them quite well. And yeah, the wild boars up in Great Smoky Mountain National Park are much more dangerous than the bears are.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, actually, my favorite story. I was talking to somebody about things, and they was like, if you see something in the wood, he was talking about these things that you could see in the woods. He's like, for the most part, you can just let them go by you or whatever. He's like, but if you see a boar, just run up a tree. He's like, you will be dead. They're the scariest things. They will try to kill you. So it's like,
yeah, but there are a lot of people in the Smokies, and almost nobody ever gets hurt by the boars.
Oh, really?
What you don't want to you don't want to get near the little piglets. You don't want to get aggressive with them. You don't want to fight with them over food. But generally, if you're cool with them, they're cool with you. Very few animals want trouble because if they get injured, they can't get away from predators or they can't catch prey or they have other problems. They don't have doctors and hospitals. So most wild animals are quite risk averse.
Okay. Yeah, as long as they're not hungry or you're not near their stuff, I guess you're fine. I think maybe he was talking about getting gored in general, but
yeah, you're in more danger from people than you are from the wildlife.
All the time. So what would be the right bear to run into in the woods that would be probably the best to kind of pass by?
A bear that's spent a lot of time around people without being harassed or hunted. A bear that's gotten food near people but not from people. So it's used to having people around when it feeds and not having people being rivals for the food. I'm around those bears all the time. Sometimes where I'm in an area where there's a salmon stream, for instance, there might be 40 or 50 bears around me at once. And within a mile or two, there might be a couple of hundred bears. They're coming and going all day long. I'm coming and going. So it's easy to have several hundred encounters in a day. And most of them in a quite peaceful situation. Now, if you're with those... Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, when you're in that situation, what exactly are you studying? Are you just observing how they interact with each other? Exactly. Are you just observing, or is there actual study you're doing? Or
well, observing is how you get the data, which is part of the study. But what I do is I do a lot of filming of their behavior, as they interact with one another and as they interact with people. And that's how you begin to learn about their social relationships, just like Jane Goodall did with chimpanzees in Africa, or Diane Fossey with gorillas. You begin to learn individuals, distinguish who's who. You see what their social roles are. You see how they relate to each other, which bears are friendly with each other, which hang around together, which are antagonistic towards each other. When they're antagonistic, is it a matter of competing for rank or turf or mates? Or some bears just plain nasty? And there are some out there that you better stay away from, or they just might decide to give you a nip or a swat.
I actually saw a video of a guy, the bear just kind of wandered. They had a gated area. A bear had just like walked into their space, and the guy was just kind of did that whole like, go on, get kind of thing. And he kind of was making his way out of there like, fine, I won't be in your picnic area. And the bear like swatted him on the way out. And the guy remained calm. He just like let the bear leave. And then he lifted his shirt up and it's just like, like, oh
wow.
man, the power of these things is like insane. Just have no, kind of thought of, I mean, they obviously, he felt a little threatened, which is why it happened in the first place. But, you know, the guy was just like, hey, get out of here.
Yeah.
So, you know, government agencies, they constantly warn people of bears that maybe are a little more, when they're loose, they lose their natural fear of humans. You know, when why do they kind of warn us of those kinds of bears?
Okay, well, this is where we get into a lot of confusion that's out there. See, I told you that we need bears that both trust and respect people. And this brings us back to what we call fear. Now, if you are out in the woods and you see a bear and the bear runs away from you, you say, good bear, it's afraid of me. If it's afraid of me, I don't have to worry about it. But let's say that bear runs down the trail and there's somebody else down there, maybe a little kid. And the bear's all freaked out and runs right over the kid. Or the kid's in its way and it shoves them aside. Or it's somebody who yells at the bear because they're scared and the bear's scared and the bear gives them a swat and a bite before it proceeds on the way. That's not a good situation.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on knowing what you're doing. Now, if you were to go to Tahoe, Lake Tahoe at the border of California and Nevada, there's a group there called the Bear League led by Ann Bryant. Now, she is a bear bully. She's dealing with black bears and she harasses bears when necessary to get them out of somebody's yard or out from under their house. Now, she crawls under these houses where the bear is. She crawls till she's on the far side of the bear, and she yells at him to get out of there. She's never been attacked. She seldom has to use pepper spray or rubber bullets, and they usually comply. Now, how many wildlife biologists or hunters or anybody else you know would dare crawl in like that?
Right.
Not very darn many.
Yeah.
And that's the bears know her, and it's more of a dominant subordinates relationship. They're not looking at her as a predator.
Yeah. They kind of know her.
She's probably shoot them out before, so they recognize her and they're like, she just wants us out of here. She's back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, she's Mama Bear, and yeah, and they've even have camcorders going under these houses, and they're recording the mothers giving birth and raising their young under there, and you can go on the internet right now and you can watch video of this.
Oh, that's so cool.
So, you know, the thing about bears is they're a little like people. They're individuals, and your safety depends on picking the right individuals, which you kind of sound out a situation when you meet one. It depends on how you behave. It depends on the bear's mood, whether somebody's just been bullying it or whether it's feeling well-fed and happy. Who knows? But you can sound them out. This is one of the things I do is I study their body language, so I know how to assess how they're feeling, what their motivation is in any given case. If it's a rare predatory bear who looks at me as a meal, well, I let it know that anything it does to me, I'm going to do it twice to it. In other words, you project confidence and you bully the bear. You don't give it any slack. On the other hand, if the bear is a mother with cubs and she just is afraid, you don't bother it at all. You try to appease the bear, let it know there's no problem. And, we have this notion that the most dangerous animal in the woods is a mother grizzly with cubs. And I've had I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of encounters with grizzly bear mothers with cubs, and mainly they're just afraid. So it's a matter of appeasing them, and sometimes they think, oh God, here's some place I can be safe for a little while. Now, I can't protect a mother and her cubs. She can do a far better job at that than I can. But sometimes they'll come down and lay down near me and go to sleep. And when they do this, amazingly enough, they don't face me while they're doing it. They're not worried about me. They face away. So they're looking in another direction as though I'm protecting their back. That sounds a little anthropomorphic and to some people a little fantastic, but
Yeah.
it's not just me that does this. When I first started, I thought, wow, I've got this great relationship with the bears. Look what they allow. But then as other people began viewing bears in these areas, they did the same things for them. They'd been doing that up at McNeil Falls for years before I came along. And it's just, they're very smart animals. They're as smart as a chimp. And go ahead.
I like that you you have like a bucket list item that's just like for everybody. You're like, a bear fell asleep next to me, and you're like, yeah, that was just Wednesday. That sounds amazing. I'd be like freaking out, taking pictures, like, there's a bear taking a nap next to me. Is that like is that the highest level of respect that like of them just kind of like, I mean, that's them at their most vulnerable, like sleeping. Because they're just available for anything, even though they're facing away from you and kind of looking out. But is that not respect, but I guess trust?
Trust, right? Well, that's I guess the highest level trust. Next to that is when the cubs offer to play with you, and this happens occasionally.
Oh, just out here living the dream, man. So I mean, when that happens, that seems like the height of like. Because you don't know, I mean, obviously the mama bear is always the mama bear. It's where that whole phrase comes from. I'm mama bear. If anything happens to them, you're getting out of here. But like when you deal with or you go into that situation, is that kind of one of those things where you go like, I gotta kind of pull back a little bit, maybe not, because obviously they probably want to play a little rougher than you want to perceive it to be. I don't know. I'm trying to get like in the mindset of like what that would entail and how amazing that would be too.
Well. Have you ever played with a dog weighing 100 or 150 pounds?
Every time I see one at the bar.
So, and that's a dog, and most dogs are relatively cooperative. Occasionally, there's some nasty dogs, but anyway, when a bear invites me to play, that's happened numerous times, and I refuse. In general, now, back in the early '70s. I had to shoot a mother bear. She'd become quite aggressive. And at those days, we didn't have pepper spray or electric fences. Didn't know any other way to deal with the situation. So I shot her, and then I raised her cubs. And that's in my book called Beauty Within the Beast, which is available as an ebook on Amazon. And the advantage of an ebook is all the photographs are in color, whereas the hard copies of the book are black and white, not as much fun. But anyway, so I took care of her cubs. I mentored them for few months. They were never captive. They came in when they wanted to. And yeah, I played with them. And so they were wild bears, but that was a situation where I bottle fed them, et cetera, and taught them how to avoid problems with people. Because like their mother, they were used to coming into our cabin and getting into trouble. So I had to dissuade them, trying to make them avoid other people, which I tell about how that worked in the book. Anyway, so now cool. that's with a 25-pound or up to 50-pound black bear cubs that were, pretty friendly with me. Yeah. And even then, if they got excited, they bit much too hard. And even wearing heavy leather gloves and leather clothing, sometimes is rather painful. Now you imagine without that kind of leather armor, 100-pound grizzly bear cub wanting to have you at his chew toy.
Oh.
No, thanks.
I just had a puppy like a week ago, like that I was fostering, and that thing just tore me up. But it's a puppy, so I can't really do much. I can't imagine that like you scale that up to bear size. Are their teeth really sharp when they're little too?
Yeah, they're like a puppy. When they get older, they're like dog teeth, not quite as sharp.
That's it.
But the main thing was. They'll start off just gently after I teach them to be gentle. Then they learn to be gentle, not bite so hard. But when they get excited, they forget all that. And they start biting and clawing as though I was another bear with thick hide and fur. And they don't do any damage to each other, but I'm kind of tender, Yeah. Blood will flow. I mean, I've never had a bear attack me and injure me on purpose. I've had my cubs chew me up at times. I had one black bear, wild black bear that I knew quite well, and it came up to me one day and wanted my attention. I was busy photographing other bears, and it walks up to me and it paws my arm like a dog would. But its claws are a little sharper, and it left a few little red streaks there. And no, I mean, just skin. Nothing serious, but they're sharp claws. So you really don't want to get raked by them.
I literally every night I sit there on my couch, like just kind of stare towards the TV and like drawing and stuff. And my dog will do that to me. And I just can't imagine that on that scale of being like how much, because it hurts when my dog does it. And I'm like, stop. He's just trying to get my attention, like, oh man. But these guys are just like, yeah, this is just my normal weight. Like, what's the problem? And you're like, oh,
you're like, that's much. When you talked about, writing about raising the cubs, in your book, do you have any video of that, or did you document it any other way? Or
good call.
Well, I have a little video footage of black bears that I used to illustrate talks about them. But that was back in the days when the only camcorders weighed about 100 pounds and the batteries weighed about 100 pounds. And when I filmed my cubs and I panned as I went, let's say, from left to right, I would get all these ghost images in between. I mean, it was totally unusable, as well as awfully difficult to haul around.
Yeah.
So, no, I have a few photographs from them in the book. But it was, that's a story of myself meeting my wife and the time we spent together, just after we were married, raising these cubs and out there. And then the new book, Phantom Grizzly, starts off before that when I was doing my initial studies on bears, my apprenticeship. And strangely enough, I had more hair-raising adventures as an apprentice than I did later on. I guess it's as you get better at it, you're more likely to avoid problems.
Oh, yeah, you don't kind of go head first into everything.
Yeah, you had a story in your new book about when you were a child on a porch. Could you fill us in a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, my dad came back from World War II, and he loved living in the mountains, and he hated living in a city and things. So he bought a little gold claim up in the Colorado Rockies above Boulder, Sugarloaf Mountain, about 8,000 feet elevation. So we lived up in the cabin, and Dad took his pickaxe and out there in his dynamite and blasted a rock and tried to get a little gold out of his pit there. He actually got more from the deer and rabbits that fell in than he got in gold, but he did it for a year. And I was about a year old, and they built a little railings on the porch where they let me as my outdoor playpen, so to speak. And one day after Dad came off work down to the cabin, he found bear tracks leading to the cabin, and he followed them down there, and they were right outside the porch where I'd been playing. And he figured, well, maybe the bear, if the bear was a man eater, it's lucky I wasn't a man yet, just a baby. And I guess it didn't like baby food, or at least the stink of my diapers was a little too much.
Yeah. Do you recall any of that? I mean, you would have been one, so not likely, but
no.
But yeah, to be that close, and they probably were like, it's a baby.'s no danger involved there. But yeah, if they were hungry, who knows what could happen?
Yeah, and there's an Alaskan woman, I forget what her name is, and she writes about how when she was just a couple of years old, she told her parents, this is out in the woods, of course, and she told her parents, she says, I was playing with a big dog. They said, there are no dogs around here, and they followed her down to the river where she'd been playing, and there tracks of a mother grizzly and cubs down there, and apparently the bears had just tolerated her and hadn't harmed her in the least. So, these things most of the bears don't want any trouble, but there are nasty bears out there, and it's partially a matter of luck. You never know the next time what's going to happen. I was, my wife and I were walking along an area in Montana, a little valley down below a road that goes into Glacier Park. And we hear some yelling and look up, and people are yelling, "Bear, bear." You know, they're hundreds of yards away, and we finally figured that where they're pointing, that there was a grizzly bear in the bushes a couple of hundred yards away from us. Well, if they hadn't warned us, we would have walked right into that bear. Now, it's not to say the bear necessarily would have attacked us, but those bears aren't as tolerant of people, and we were rather glad that we didn't walk into it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Another thing I read in the book was one of your early influences was Grizzly Adams. Is that right?
Yeah. In fact, I lived east of Berkeley, California for a number of years, near Mount Diablo, and that was one of the areas where Grizzly Adams used to do a lot of his hunting and trapping of grizzly bears. In fact, I was a few years back, I ran into Dan Haggerty, who'd starred in the Grizzly Adams TV program and a couple of movies, and they tell me they're going to get a new program going and asked me whether I wanted to take the role of Grizzly Adams as a young man, and I got a kick out of that since I did in real life what he
do it in real life.
pretended to do.
Yeah. That's what I read. That I was like, oh, that's so funny. Like you almost became like the new young version of Grizzly Adams. You know, I'm a little older than Dave, but I remember growing up watching the Life and Times of Grizzly Adams movie from like the middle mid 70s, and just how interesting that was, and in his, because it's I don't know if the movie itself is a total true story, but Grizzly Adams was a real person, and that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll tell you something else funny. Go ahead.
You were born to do that. I mean, you had an encounter as a baby. Like you're like bred to do this whole thing. You cuddled out in the woods. I love it.
Well, when my book Beauty Within the Beast came out, and one of the producers from Animal Planet, Shea Abdullah, saw it and he thought, "Wow, this is a great book." He said it was one of the best wildlife books he'd ever read. And I got flown down to Hollywood. They were going to make a movie out of it as a follow-up to The Crocodile Hunter. Oh, wow. And then as we were discussing this down in a Hollywood agent's office, they said, well, geez, they saw my film of this and said, my God, would you like to be the host for the new Wild Kingdom TV program? So here they're talking about more money per week than I'd been making per year. And
you're like, where do I sign?
Well, the problem was to get to talk to them, I'd had to sign a contract. And I hadn't been able to read it very thoroughly because they said, sign it now or he leaves. Oh, I knew I was getting a bum's rush, but I didn't see any alternative. So I read it that evening, and it said the agent would get 15% of whatever I made for those deals, plus anything that came in the future. And I said, I don't mind paying an agent for whatever he gets me, but this guy can sit back and not do another day's work for me the rest of his life, and he's still going to get 15% of whatever I make. And I said, no. I said, no. And he said, take it or leave it.
And well, leave it.
And I said, no. And then about that time, 9/11 came along, and suddenly there was no interest in bears. It was all about terrorism. So that whole thing fell through anyway, but it did teach me a lesson. And I talked to another entertainment agent a few years later, who was one of my bear viewing clients. He said, oh yeah, Steve, they give people the bum's rush, and even some of the most famous artists about signed contracts like that when they were young, and they've been supporting a whole slew of people ever since then, and they can't get out of it. They've got a contract. Said you were smart not to go with it. So
that's I can't believe that they would be able to do that for any project that you're in for the rest of your life or whatever. That's not something, something that they brought to you. But
it's kind of how that whole business is ran. I mean, it's like the business model is try to get them in, especially younger. They'll be like, oh, let's just get this guy, and then and hopefully you wouldn't be able to get launched into like, oh, well, that's sort of the project that I started you on. It's like, well, it's not, but because I have an agent too, and he takes 15%, but it's just on the one little project
Right.
I have, so it's it's not too
Yeah.
bad. But I'm not out there having like deals or anything like that. It's just the one little book I got.
Well, and you're not out risking your life for him to get 15%.
Yeah, I know. He's just in an office somewhere. you're hanging out with the bears.
Well, that was the other thing with the movie with Wild Kingdom is they wanted me to do what Steve Irwin had been doing with snakes and crocodiles, to do it with lions and tigers and bears and other big animals. Getting them angry and charging. And I said, no way. My whole life has been about getting animals comfortable with me. So
Right.
that doesn't make good TV. I said, well, then neither do I.
Mhm.
Yeah, you'd only have one episode.
That's about the way I look at it. Right? Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it's wild out there. You could have had your own catchphrase though. That would have been cool. Like, did you think about that at all? Like, this is not a knife. This is a knife. That could have been your thing. Oh man. Well, let's see. So you said you stay safe. Oh, actually, I had a question about the two bears, the ones that you kind of raised. I kind of was the pseudo mom for that. Did you ever go back and visit them as they got older and didn't need you anymore? Were you able to kind of go back and I don't know, just see how they're doing, or is that kind of impossible at a certain age?
Well, I took care of them for a couple of months.
Mhm.
First thing I did was I fed them for a few weeks and got a relationship with them so they would trust me.
Mhm.
But you can't keep feeding an animal. You don't want it dependent on you. You don't want it dependent on people at all for food. So then
Mhm.
their chore was getting them into natural foods. And they'd learned some of these from their mother. But it was, early summer, so there were new foods coming along that hadn't been there earlier. So I got books on plants that were edible for people. And then I went out and introduced them to the cubs. And some of these I just point to and they would sniff it. A lot of times they wouldn't pay much attention. But if I chewed on it myself, they'd sniff my mouth, and then I could give it to them, or they'd lick it and then they'd try to eat it. So, basically I was helping them learn how to survive in the wild. And we met other bears out there, and I took kind of the role of mother bear of defending them. And then we ran into one mother who had 3 cubs of her own. And since her home range was right near my cabin, as the cubs' mother had been there, there was a good chance that this was a female relative of their mother. And that may be why she started allowing my cubs to play with her cubs.
Mm.
And they would mix up, and sometimes she would leave and my cubs would follow her, disappear for a while, come back later that day by themselves. And eventually she lost 2 of her cubs. And then my cubs started spending a lot more time with her. And I thought, this is what I need, is for her to adopt the cubs and get me out of the picture. I wanted to study them, but Fish and Game had demanded that I shoot them and bring them in because they didn't want any bears that weren't afraid of people. And it wasn't, my ideas about fear and respect, they were not even interested in living in. It was shoot them or you're in trouble. So it was better to shoo them away whenever they came near and let nature take its course. And then there were some people who lived in the area there, and I talked to them a few years later, and they said the cubs had come around now and then, but they hadn't been any trouble.
Okay.
And
Well,
that's what I wanted to hear,
Yeah. Okay. I thought that story was going to go badly. I'm glad that you were able to kind of shoo them away. I was like, oh no, I shouldn't have gone back. Yeah. So I have a note here that about bear signaling. They signal to each other. I actually didn't know about this at all.
Okay. Well, they don't use the same signals as dogs or cats.
Yeah.
But there are some relationships. If you look at a dog when it gets nasty, what does it do? It curls its lip up and exposes its upper canines.
Mm-hmm.
Cat does somewhat the same thing. So does a lion or a tiger, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Bears don't expose their upper canines the same way. They don't curl up the lip. They extend the upper lip forward. But in all these animals, the upper canines are a threat. The lower canines aren't. When an animal is breathing or eating or whatever, the lower canines are visible. But when they want to threaten you, they expose the upper canine. Now, you'll see a lot of photographs on the web of bears with their mouths open and their upper canines exposed. But nearly all of these are from a bear that's being tossed food, and it's got its mouth open to catch the food.
Yeah.
And so the problem with signaling is a given action may have multiple interpretations depending on context. And so the pictures that are supposedly of a bear that's being aggressive are usually just a bear that's being fed. And when you see video footage of bears fighting, sometimes they're really fighting and sometimes they're just playing.
Yeah.
And when they're playing, they'll put in a lot of supposedly growly sounds because that's either what they think bears do, or it's because that's what the audience wants to hear. Because dogs make sound while they're playing like that. Bears don't. When bears, all you'll normally hear is some heavy breathing, but they're not doing any growling sounds like that. And they're even when you're watching a documentary, it's not necessarily completely accurate. It is entertainment after all. And so they juice it up. But that's far better than the average story you hear about. Oh, I had this bear encounter and I got away. I shot this bear and it died right at my feet. I mean, I can't think of how many stories I've heard of somebody who shot a bear in an emergency situation and it died just at their feet. All I can say is I don't believe it. It makes a good tale, but not the way it usually happens.
Yeah, can they take like a pretty good beat? Not a beating, but like you have to have like specialty equipment to like really take them down, right? Am I wrong? Like they have like a thick hide.
Well, they've got a moderately thick hide. They've got fairly tough bones. Now the cub's mother, when I shot her, the bullet went through her right arm, broke the upper arm bone, the humerus, went through her lungs and her heart, tore them apart, went through the muscle on the left arm, and she ran away over 50 yards through willow brush that was so dense I couldn't even force my way through it. She went through it like she was parting through grass before she dropped down and died. So there's an animal with a lot of power, a lot of resistance to pain. If she'd come for me, she could have attacked me and probably torn me up. She didn't. I later shot another black bear, and the first shot got it in the skull, and it kept thrashing around. I thought it was trying to get up and come for me. So I emptied my gun into it, and only after it was dead did I find out, no, those are just involuntary muscle movements as it was thrashing around. But that said, the brown bears on Kodiak Island, the great big Kodiaks, on average, when they're being hunted by, a big game hunter and his guides, took an average of 4 shots to kill it.
Wow.
And so a lot of people who are hunting aren't really good shots when they're in that stress situation. So they may not hit a vital spot. It's very hard to do, and that's with a bear usually that's standing still, doesn't know you're there. Its adrenaline is not up. So that's taking 4 shots to bring it down. Now you take a bear that's charging you, its adrenaline is up and it's coming fast. It does not run straight at you. It's like a rocking horse. Its head's up, its head's down, it bounds. So it's got that kind of rocking horse run. So if you want to shoot it in the heart, you have 1/10 of a second when the heart's exposed to shoot it there. And if you see that and you shoot, by the time you shoot, the heart's no longer exposed. It's head now down, and you're going to hit it in someplace less vital. So killing a bear in an emergency is very hard. Much better to use pepper spray most of the time. People who pepper spray a bear are almost never hurt by the bear, whereas people who shoot a bear get mauled about half the time.
Wow.
Noted.
And there are a lot of people in Alaska say, well, I'm going to trust my gun. hell with pepper spray. I'm going to trust my gun. And as in my talk last Friday, I said, well, fine. You as an adult may be expert with a gun, or you may not. But even if you're an expert, what about your wife or your kids? How many of them? You're not going to hand your 338 Magnum or your 44 Magnum to your kid to carry around, but you can give them a can of pepper spray. And as far as most people being experts with guns, well, again, it depends what the bear's doing. I've talked to a Navy SEAL and an Army Ranger. So these are professional shooters. And they say, well, the first thing you need to do is to be icy calm, because the harder your heart is beating, the more your arms are going to jerk. So every time your heart beats, your arms jerk. They said you really have to train yourself to be calm to shoot well. He said the first time he faced a bear, he couldn't do it. He said he normally counted out the seconds subconsciously as he was preparing to fire and firing. And he said, but after this bear came up there, he lost 6 seconds when his mind went blank. He didn't shoot his gun and the bear didn't come for him. It stopped short. But he said if that bear had not stopped short, it could have had him. He says, okay, I'm an expert. I do this for a living. And I couldn't do it. He says, so I don't really trust a lot of people who make these claims.
Wow.
And I can say from experience that, you have to have a lot of times you've been up with a bear before you can be really calm with it. I've reached that point. This doesn't mean that I'll be calm the next time it happens, but usually I'm totally ice when it happens. Yeah.
I mean, I also like the probably hit ratio is better on a can of mace. You can just kind of throw it around a little bit. Your chances are pretty high on hitting it as opposed to trying to figure out the gun. And like you said, that guy's mind just going completely wiped. Did he say why? That I mean, it just happened because he was just like, I'm so scared. Is that where the mind blankness happened, or?
It's partially fear and it's partially just trying to adjust your mind around what's happening because you're not used to it.
Oh, okay.
Your mind is, oh God, what's going on? Is this bear really coming at me, etc. By the time you go through a few things like that, the bear's on you.
Yeah,
they can travel. Hero scenario. They can travel 45 feet a second, right?
Wow.
Yeah. 40. What did you say? 45 feet a second?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess they're huge, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So, when you see cartoons of a bear, they look like they have short legs. Their legs are actually quite long.
Wow.
It's just that their body is deep, but they can move very fast. They can outrun a quarter horse from a dead start.
Oh wow.
Are you so you're out of Alaska? Are they hibernating right now? I don't know.
They're probably, as long as there's snow in the ground, but often they'll den at higher altitude where they have longer snow cover that keeps them hidden from other bears and from wolves.
Oh, okay.
And the big males will come out first, and they usually start coming out in April or May, and they will go along areas where they've learned that there are avalanches. So the avalanche might kill moose or caribou, mountain sheep, goats, whatever it is. Or they go down to the ocean and they look for dead marine mammals that washed up on shore.
Oh, wow.
And so they run around looking for protein and fat. Their fat reserves have been used up, and sometimes animals killed during the winter have some fat left on them, but they'll bulk up at protein, get their muscles big and strong. And then in late May, the mating season starts. So they'll be competing with each other for mates, and they'll be hunting around trying to find mates. And once the season starts, they don't do much eating. So they have to get their eating done after months of hibernation, between the end of hibernation and the start of mating season.
So if like just for the viewers at home or the listeners at home, if they come, let's say they're not in a calming situation, they do kind of come across the bear and they weren't prepared to be encountering a bear? What's the best kind of 1, 2, 3 method? Let's say they don't have anything on them. They don't have any kind of weapons or anything like that. What's the best plan here?
Okay, number one, you try to stay calm. Number two, if there are multiple people, they're grouped together within arm's length of each other.
Okay.
No group of 6 or more people has ever been attacked by a bear.
Oh, noted.
And when I go into schools and I talk to kids, I use the 3 blind mice theme. And if you see a bear, group together, so on and so forth. I just try to give them a little mnemonic that they can remember. So calm down, group together, and then walk into the school if they're out there in the playground. But the first thing is stay calm and group together. What they don't want to do is run around like a bunch of scared chickens. Ah! That's like saying, "Woo! Come and eat me! Come and eat me!"
Man, my dinner's loud today.
It scares me just in the fact that you said you taught them that, so when they're out on the playground, they know what to do. Like this is happening in the schoolyard. That's crazy.
It happens up here occasionally.
Yeah.
So nowadays, you spend most of your time, teaching safety and conservation and things like that. So what do you got going on now and coming up in the future?
Well, mainly right now, I'm working on my next book, Nearly Breakfast for a Grizzly Bear, and writing scientific papers. A lot of people know that adult male bears kill cubs, and there's this idea they kill cubs so the mother will come into heat again and breed with them. And I always amuse when somebody starts telling me this theory, because I'm the guy who came up with it back 40 some years ago.
They're like, you don't understand. Be like, I understand more than anybody.
And not only have I find that doesn't really hold true in North America, but I just published a paper got a paper out there about adult females killing cubs. And strangely enough, the only females that kill cubs are ones that have cubs of their own. Mothers kill cubs. Those without cubs don't kill cubs. And what they're doing, so let's say you've got a mother that has cubs. And if somebody else's cubs want to come and nurse from her, this is robbing her cubs of some milk. And maybe that cub that comes over might fight with her cubs and injure them. So what she does is she tries to shoo that alien cub away, or a lot of times she'll just bite it or swat it and kill it.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
No, most people didn't.
Yeah. So, you said you're teaching a lot now, like you said, you were saying, Brian. What's the book about? You said it's called Early Breakfast. What's the
nearly.
Nearly breakfast. Sorry, I thought you said early breakfast. I was like, all right, we're talking about it.
Okay. So I've got 3 memoirs. The first one I wrote was Beauty Within the Beast, about my experiences with the orphan cubs. The second one is Phantom Grizzly, about my apprenticeship as a bear biologist.
And that's out
Nearly
now.
Nearly Breakfast for a Bear. Nearly Breakfast for a Grizzly Bear is the third memoir, and that fills in the gap between Phantom Grizzly first and Beauty Within the Beast third. It fills in that middle gap. And then I've got a few more that will be coming about at later years and further adventures. And some people say, well, Steve, why don't you write about something besides bears? I said, well, that's like asking Jane Goodall to write about something besides chimpanzees.
Yeah. You're the bear guy.
Well, see, the thing of it is, there are a lot of things that you see out there that are very interesting and people enjoy reading about that few people have ever seen.
Right.
And the situations where I saw it don't exist anymore. Because I would go down to places like Katmai National Park and have the place to myself. There's one area on the coast of a few square miles with, 100, 200 bears. I'd have that to myself for weeks at a time.
Wow.
And then it became popular with bear viewers. And the more bear viewers came in, the fewer bears were there to be seen. And now where I had it to myself, you might have 100 visitors in a day where we had up to 200 bears. Now you might have 20 bears, usually fewer.
Mhm.
So the kinds of things that I saw in the past can't be seen anymore down there.
Wow.
In
Yeah.
fact, most areas you just simply cannot duplicate what I've observed.
Mhm.
So I would like to get this information out to people, and I write books and I sell books, and then the proceeds that I get from selling the books then fund me to write the next book and to
Mhm.
do the conservation work and try to protect these bears.
Mhm.
We've got people who
that.
want to hunt the bears, even those that are in the national park. We've got people who want to open mines where the pollutants could kill the bears. All sorts of things happening out here. The bears need a lot of protection.
Mhm.
And one of the worst things with the bears is just the misinformation that keeps people too afraid of bears or too complacent.
Mhm.
I mean, on
Yeah.
the one hand, I try to teach people, don't freak out with the bear, be calm, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, there are people like the late Tim Treadwell who thought, well, if you just love the bears, they'll love you back. And they expect the bear to read their minds, and it's not going to happen. Bear will
Yeah.
read your body language, but if it happens to be a bully bear and you're between it and food, well, don't expect it to, be
Yeah.
complacent.
Yeah, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like there's still animals in the wild. They don't have your same like connections with like, oh, that's just a guy over there. It's like that's maybe a threat. They don't have like the visual or verbal cues. I mean, even when I see a group of teenagers, I get a little scared. You know how it is. But
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, these. So is there any truth to like there's like different ways to like not be mauled by like different bears or like whatever they always say like stay still and what is that? I forget the other
Or
one.
get you get tall or something,
Oh
get
yeah,
big.
does that work? Getting real tall?
Not really.
Okay,
I
I need to know what to not do.
So put your arms up again right now. Put your
Okay.
arms up again. Okay.
Ah,
Now wave them back, wave them side to side. Okay. Now
terrifying.
what in nature looks a little like that?
A scarecrow. That's it.
No, a caribou.
Yeah.
A caribou.
Oh, got
I
it.
talked to natives up in northern Alaska, and they laugh at white people during that because they say, well, when we were out seeing a bear and we want to get it close, we do that so it thinks it's a caribou and they come running up to eat us, and then we shoot it. And they said, you white guys are so stupid. You want to chase the bear off, doing just the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Now,
When I
Watch
do this,
over
the closer
here.
they get.
at the and
Okay.
they say, do that so the bear knows you're human.
Mhm.
Well, bears can learn you're human, but waving your arms doesn't tell it you're human. All it does is movement catches its attention.
Uh-huh.
Now, if I want to look big, I don't put my arms up alone. I put my jacket over my head or something of the sort. So
Uh-huh.
what they're seeing is something that looks a lot larger, or your shirt or
God.
whatever it is, something solid, not just a couple of arms sticking up. Or you climb up on a log or something of the sort to look bigger.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
There are.
I feel so misinformed. Well, I mean, I feel informed now, but I feel like I've lived a life of lies based off of that.
When I teach about bear safety, I have a couple of safety manuals that I've written that are on Amazon. One is called the Alaska Magnum Bear Safety Manual, which gives the basics. I had been teaching just using other people's books, but I found so many errors or outmoded ideas, I decided to write my own. And then after I wrote that, I wrote one called When Bears Whisper, Do You Listen?, which is advanced techniques. So the basics are for somebody who doesn't really expect to meet a bear, but what are the precautions I take if I'm in a hike or camp or fish or whatever. When Bears Whisper is advanced techniques if you actually expect to meet bears. How do you deal with encounters? And like I say, those are both on Amazon, and there's a lot of information there you won't find anyplace else. But it's all based on personal experience, and so much of what I read out there in other people's safety manuals are based on second or fifth or 10th hand information.
Mhm.
So, or they're just based on somebody who got attacked and they say, well, this is what that person did wrong. Well, my books are not based on what somebody did wrong. They're based on what somebody did right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So stay calm. Try to not be noticed. Be respectful. Yeah.
And if you are noticed, group together.
Mhm.
That is because I'm usually with a group of people, so I'll remember to chain hands as well.
Well, you don't need to change that, and just stay within arm's length of each other.
Okay.
And if there's several of you, and the bear's not really making a lot of trouble, just kind of move around a bit, back and forth from each other. Makes it hard for the bear to tell them how many people are there.
That's a really good tip, actually. There's 3 of you. You just kind of zigzag for a while.
Right.
It's fantastic. All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. You, like I said, a fascinating year for me would be your Wednesday. I can't believe that you've just had all these encounters and just the sheer amount of stories I'm sure you have just like tucked away that you probably don't even think are that interesting would leave my mouth agape, I'm sure. Just like, what do you mean? So your book coming out, it's called The Phantom Grizzly. Moments of Terror, Years of Fascination, and a Lifetime of Adventure. I really do appreciate you joining us and like giving us all your bear facts. Bear facts are my favorite, and all your thanks for teaching us how to survive a bear attack, because apparently we were entirely wrong. Do you want to leave us with anything there? You obviously kind of told us what you have coming up, but
well, the only thing I have to say is I'm surprised with your monster soup. You haven't asked me about any alien abductions.
Oh, well, I felt like it was like a farce to ask you that, because you feel like so like knowledgeable that I feel like it'd be like offensive to ask you this. So, do you have an alien one?
Sometimes yes, I've been involved in many alien abductions.
Well, I should have started with
that. But the twist on this thing is I am the alien doing the abduction.
Oh, I got you.
I'm the one. I'm the one who fly. I'm the one who flies around and does the capture, and then does all this manipulation, taking tissue samples of the bears and the moose and the wolves and the other animals.
Yeah.
The last thing you whisper to him is, "No one will believe you."
They wake up in bed and they're like, "I swear I was taken last night."
What happened?
Yep. And I've often been asked by people to say, well, you're out there in the woods all the time. Have you ever run across Bigfoot?
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell them, well, there was one time I thought I had. This is in Montana in the Rocky Mountains. And I was out about 55 below zero hiking. And I came across these tracks in the snow that looked, the pattern of them was very much like a human foot pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, it felt very weird that day for reasons I don't understand. But anyway, I followed these tracks and followed them, wondering what the hell's going on. I thought, well, finally I found a Sasquatch, because it was just right, left, just like a human footprints.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to a barbed wire fence where the thing had gone through, and there was this back road there, and on it were bear prints. And I realized what had happened was that when a bear walks, its hind foot comes forward after its forefoot has come down, and it puts the hind foot ahead of the forefoot. So instead of having the forefoot first and the hind foot afterwards, it comes down ahead. But if a bear is really fat, that hind foot doesn't come all the way forward and it lands on top of the forefoot. Mm-hmm. So it gives you bear tracks just looking like human tracks, one after the other.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of these stories about somebody tracking Bigfoot are actually just a fat bear.
Yeah,
wow.
I actually heard this guy did research on the Yeti, and that he came to the same conclusion, because the way these like footprints were going up a thing, and he was like, oh, he's like, I one day I just left my biases at the door and was like, oh, this is just a bear. Like say probably exact same situation where it's just like, coupled up. That well, I'm sorry, you didn't run to a Sasquatch. You would not only having a super interesting life, also been the guy who had to find a Sasquatch and finally prove it.
So I'm not gonna suggest that there aren't cryptozoos out there,
mm-hmm.
but I know a lot of people have spent a lot of time in the woods, none of whom have ever come across any evidence of it. So pardon me if I take it with a little grain of salt.
Mhm.
No, listen, we're grain of salt people. We're just here to have, like, I come to it with like oh, it'd be cool if it happened, but like, I have never experienced anything. It's more just an interesting topic for us. We've met a lot of really interesting people within that group of people, you know, who kind of have these out of spindle ideas, and I'm just like, oh, these are neat to listen to. And we've heard so many people's like firsthand experiences with these that you're kind of like, well, you know, maybe there's some meat on the bone here. It's just exciting to kind of, you know, listen to, and that there's still like undiscovered things out there is always exciting to hear about.
We're fascinated by the weird.
Yeah,
but I'll say this: most of my experience has been up in Alaska, and there's nothing for a primate to eat up here during wintertime. So this is not a good place to find them. If you're going to look for primates, you'd look at someplace like California, where you have nuts and berries and other things that a primate could eat during the wintertime. This is assuming that it's living in the wilds and not some interdimensional being or the other Twilight Zone
that's
stuff.
what I was going to say. You're assuming that it's a primate. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's just as much fascinating things out there just within the bear community that's apparently just as cool. So, I mean, that stuff is just as fantastical. Just learned about all that stuff. So, you know, it's fine for that to be the main thing anyway. So, but yeah, this is fantastic. I love it so much. Okay.
I hope your viewers will buy the books and help fund the next book and our conservation efforts. We've always had a difficult time, but now with the change in administration in Washington and the defunding of federal funds to wildlife management agencies and to conservation organizations, it's going to be a far tougher fight than ever before to protect these populations. And these bears at Katmai are unique. And if we lose them, we're never going to have anything like it again in the history of the world.
Yeah.
It's not like with the dire wolves where you could just produce a few here and there for Lala. You can't produce it. You can't reproduce an ecosystem just by producing one or two species. You can't put a dire wolf out there and have a dire wolf ecosystem, even though they talk about it. Even if you put mastodons and giant ground sloths, where are the giant short-faced bears? You know, where are the other components? And we don't have the same vegetation we used to. So contrary to all the wishful thinking, we got to preserve what we have or it's gone forever.
Yeah, there's a big part of everything that's like the ecosystem has to be diverse, and it has to be like filled with all kinds of flora and fauna and things that do one thing you think are just a tree, but that tree is also feeding that plant that's underneath it, and that plant is feeding an animal that comes and eats it, takes it back to their, you know, and then the droplets that it leaves will maybe even feed some insects that also do another thing. So it's all kind of this whole circle, you know, no pun, you know, circle of life that really is so important to, you know, wherever they're at that time. So again, you're doing the Lord's work out there. And so go out and support his book. I'm going to grab myself a copy just to, you know, not only the fact that you're super interesting, and I'm sure there's stuff that you didn't even touch on, but, you know, to really support what your efforts out there. They're absolutely fantastic.
Support the cause,
I really do appreciate, I appreciate you coming on so much. So thank you. I really do appreciate it.
Great meeting you guys, Brian and David.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was wonderful meeting you.
All right, everybody. Well, come back every Friday. We are live on YouTube, or, you know, just on your thing for every Friday at 5. And if you have any fun stories that you want to share with us, Monster Soup Podcast at gmail.com. We have our Facebook page, Monster Soup Podcast. And then if you want to look at my weird, fun children's book art, I have Mischief Factory at TikTok or mischieffactory.com. So check that out. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Stringham. We really do appreciate you on. Thanks for telling us all our bear facts. Thanks, buddy.
Good enough. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
See you guys. Bye.
See ya.